What if I told you the most dangerous battles you'll ever fight happen in your mind without you even realizing it? If these unseen battles of the mind awaken something within you, if you've ever felt the silent tug of doubt or distraction, then journey with us. Subscribe not merely for more content, but for more clarity in the war you may not even know you're fighting. It begins so quietly that you scarcely notice it. A fleeting thought, a whisper of hesitation. Was that God's voice, or just your own? The enemy is subtle, never shouting his lies, but slipping them into your mind like shadows at dusk. The first game he plays is doubt, not bold-faced denial, but a slow erosion. He will not declare that God is unkind, no, that would be too obvious. Instead, he suggests, perhaps he does not care as much as you thought. It is not a wall built overnight, but a single brick laid each day until you find yourself standing in a fortress of your own skepticism. Then comes the illusion of control. You begin to believe that your life, your plans, your desires are yours alone to manage. If only you work harder, think smarter, move faster, the voice hisses, you can bend the world to your will. And when you succeed, pride takes root. When you fail, despair. The game is not to show you the truth, that you are never the master, but to let you chase the lie until it ruins you. But the enemy does not stop there. He knows the power of a focused heart, so his next move is to fracture your mind with distractions. He does not need to tempt you with great evil if he can keep you busy with small things. An endless stream of tasks, messages, entertainment, anything to keep you glancing downward rather than looking upward. Your mind, once a garden for truth and wisdom, becomes a cluttered shelf, packed so tightly with nonsense that there is no room left for eternity. Desire, too, becomes a weapon in his hand. He takes what is good, hunger, ambition, affection, and twists it ever so slightly. What was once a longing for love becomes a thirst for possession. What began as a pursuit of excellence turns into it begins with a whisper, not a shout. The enemy is far too clever for bold-faced lies. Instead, he slips a quiet suggestion into the mind, so subtle, so reasonable, that you hardly notice it's there. Did God really say he loves you? Not a denial of God's goodness, no, that would be too crude. Rather, a question, a small, nagging question that curls itself around your thoughts like a vine, tightening its grip. Perhaps God cares, but not as much as you once believed. Perhaps he listens, but not always. Perhaps he is good, but distant. Too far off to notice the fine details of your struggle. The brilliance of this game is not in its suddenness, but in its slow erosion. His goal is not to make you stop believing in God overnight. That would be too obvious, too abrupt. No, the strategy is to hollow out your faith one doubt at a time. A delayed answer to prayer becomes a sign of his indifference. A difficult season starts to look like his neglect. And before long, you are no longer certain if you are praying to a loving father or a silent observer. The enemy works not by dragging you into open rebellion, but by bending your trust ever so slightly. A subtle tilt at first, a mere fraction off the path, until months or years later you find yourself miles away from where you began. You still speak of God, still attend to outward duties, but in the quiet of your heart, a silent suspicion gnaws. Is he really as good as I thought? And that is the true danger. Not a sudden collapse of faith, but the slow crumbling of confidence. The kind that leaves you saying all the right words while secretly wondering if they mean anything at all. The enemy's craft lies not in tearing the soul away from its creator by force, but by persuading it that it no longer needs him. It begins with a seemingly innocent thought. You are capable. Of course, there is some truth to it. Humans are given strength, reason, and will. But the lie twists itself into the roots of that truth, growing like a weed, until the soul begins to believe it can stand alone. Why wait for God's timing, the voice murmurs, when you can shape your own destiny? Why trust his plan when you can craft a better one? It is a clever trick. At first, it feels like freedom, like stepping into the driver's seat of your own life. You set goals, chase dreams, and take pride in each small success. Yet, the more control you seem to gain, the more anxious you become. Each decision weighs heavier, for if everything depends on you, then every failure is your fault alone. Pride swells when you succeed, whispering that you are the master of your fate. But when you stumble, and you will, the same voice turns sharp. This is your doing. You are not clever enough, not strong enough. You have only yourself to blame. Thus the soul swings between two chains, pride and despair, both anchored in the same illusion. It is a cruel game, for the enemy knows that so long as you believe you hold the reins, you will never reach for the hand of the one who truly guides. He does not need to convince you that God is absent, only that his presence is unnecessary. And so you labor under the crushing weight of your own sovereignty, mistaking it for strength, all the while drifting further from the quiet, steady voice that says, "Without me, you can do nothing." The enemy does not always lure the soul with grand temptations or glaring sins. Often, his work is far more subtle. He does not need to make you wicked if he can simply make you busy. The mind, once fixed on eternal things, is slowly crowded with the urgent but unimportant. A flurry of tasks, a never-ending stream of news, the small demands of the day, all perfectly reasonable on their own, begin to pile up like leaves in the wind, scattering your focus. It starts innocently enough. A quick glance at the clock, a mental list of things to do, a sudden worry about tomorrow's plans. These are responsibilities, the voice insists. You must tend to them, and of course you must. But as the noise of the world grows louder, the still small voice within grows fainter. Moments once reserved for prayer are now given to checking messages. Time once spent in quiet reflection is replaced with scrolling through endless trivialities. You tell yourself you will return to God after the work is done, after the house is clean, after the next task is finished. But the tasks never end. The enemy's aim is not to make you renounce your faith, but to make you forget it. He knows that if he can keep your mind spinning, always planning, always reacting, you will have no space left to ponder what is eternal. He does not need to block the road to heaven. He only needs to make you too distracted to notice you've wandered off the path. Without realizing it, you become a soul weighed down not by great sin, but by countless small concerns. Each one harmless enough on its own, yet together forming a wall between you and the one who calls you to be still and know that he is God. Pause for a moment. Has a thought ever lingered too long? A whisper of fear or pride that felt too natural to question? If so, share it in the comments. Let no one fight alone. Your story might be the key that unlocks another soul's understanding. The enemy knows better than to create desire from nothing. He cannot. All desire, in its truest form, is planted by God, a whisper of eternity woven into the fabric of the soul. Love, hunger, rest, ambition, these are not evil in themselves, but the game lies in the twisting. He does not seek to extinguish these desires, he seeks to distort them. Love is nudged ever so slightly until it becomes possession, a need not to cherish but to control. Hunger, once a simple longing for nourishment, is exaggerated into gluttony until the soul no longer eats to live but lives to eat. Rest, meant to restore, is stretched into sloth, where idleness replaces peace. Even ambition, a desire to do good work, is bent into pride. What began as a pursuit of excellence becomes an obsession with recognition. The enemy's art is not destruction by force, but corruption by degrees. He does not urge the soul to abandon virtue overnight. He merely encourages it to overindulge, to cross a line so subtly that it does not notice the shift. What was once a pure flame of longing becomes a consuming fire. The great danger lies in the appearance of innocence. These are not evil things until they are. A heart that once beat for God begins to beat for a feeling, a craving, an obsession. And by the time the soul realizes it has been enslaved, it is already clutching the chains it mistook for freedom. The enemy's most insidious trick is not to tempt the soul into sin. That is only the beginning. His greater triumph lies in what follows, the echo of shame. When a man stumbles, the enemy does not rush to celebrate. He waits, crouching in the shadows of the heart, ready to whisper, "Look at what you've done. How could you ever be forgiven?" It is not the sin itself that chains the soul. It is the silence that comes after. Shame is a prison built from within. At first, the guilt seems holy, even just. The soul mistakes its self-condemnation for humility, believing that to loathe oneself is somehow noble. But slowly the voice twists the truth. You are not merely broken, you are irreparable. You are not merely sinful, you are beyond saving. The soul, now convinced of its unworthiness, begins to withdraw, not only from others but from God himself. The enemy knows that isolation is the key. A wounded heart kept in the open may yet find healing, but a heart hidden in the dark will only fester. And so, the soul reasons that it must fix itself before returning to God, as though a drowning man should wait until he stops gasping before crying out for rescue. The longer the heart sits alone, the thicker the chains of shame become. What began as guilt now breeds despair. And the enemy smiles, not because the soul has sinned, but because it has decided to suffer in silence, believing the lie that mercy was meant for someone else. The enemy is far too cunning to offer sin as it truly is, ugly, hollow, and enslaving. Instead, he dresses it as comfort, a quiet refuge for the weary soul. He whispers not of rebellion, but of relief. "You are tired," he says. "You deserve this. Just a small indulgence, no one will know, and it will ease your burden." And so sin presents itself not as a threat, but as a friend, a soft escape from the harshness of the world. At first, the soul finds a fleeting sense of comfort. The anger that once gnawed within is momentarily soothed by spiteful words. The ache of loneliness is numbed by indulgence. The weight of stress is briefly lifted by distraction. The battle rages, not with clashing swords or roaring flames, but in the quiet corners of the mind, where whispers shape destinies. The enemy does not need to break you with a single blow. He is content to bend you, thought by thought, step by step, until you are lost without ever realizing you wandered. But take heart, the same mind that can be a battlefield can also be a fortress. For every lie, there is a greater truth. For every shadow cast, a brighter light. You are not alone in this war, nor are you defenseless. Fix your heart upon what is eternal, sharpen your mind with what is true, and stand firm. For the enemy's greatest fear is not the strength of your will, but the strength of your faith. The battle does not end when the video stops. If this has stirred your heart or sharpened your mind, subscribe and stay watchful. And speak in the comments, not as idle words, but as warriors comparing notes, for iron sharpens iron. Let us walk this path together.